What's up, everybody? Kevin O'Neill here with the Buffalo Commander, and I just wanted to give kind of a state of the union for the Commanders. What's transpired over the last few weeks? How are we feeling about all the positions? What's to come? So, first of all, as far as the coaching staff, I think it's funny. I think the narrative that everybody started to have once we moved away from Ben Johnson and started to talk more about Dan Quinn was that we settled for a Dan Quinn. It's kind of a remake here of Dan Quinn, who's obviously been in the league, been around. But really, if you look at this now in hindsight, especially with what's transpired with the other coaches that we brought on and from what was said in the past by our owner and general manager, and I think we got the guy we actually really wanted. If you go back to the few weeks ago when we hired Dan Quinn, the reports were that Dan Quinn was actually on our radar and, in the running for the guy since day one. So this isn't somebody was settled for. And we now know, after really looking at Ben Johnson, who obviously is extremely talented offensive coordinator for the Lions, and he had all the hype, including me. I mean, I'm not going to act like I was any better. I was on that train too. But now we know that, this guy, although extremely talented, he was a young guy. He, you got to remember the head coach is somebody that has to assemble the rest of the coaching staff. And Adam Peters, somebody that was interviewed right in the beginning when he got hired, they asked the question to him in a press conference, what are you looking for in a head coach? And he said, a leader of men. And I think that's exactly what we got. I'm super excited about Dan Quinn now after seeing everybody that he's brought on, all the reports about how much he is really respected by in the league. And, if you look at the coaching staff that he assembled, he's done an incredible job. So, for example, our defensive coordinator, Joe Witt, who came over from the Cowboys, he was the assistant defensive coordinator that worked with Dan Quinn. I have no doubt this guy was probably offered the defensive coordinator job for the Cowboys, the prestigious Cowboys, in quotes, and he could have taken that, but he decided to go with Dan Quinn to the Commanders. I think that's very telling of Dan Quinn and, the power and influence that he has on people and how excited people are about him. This coaching staff is pretty impressive. The other guy that I'm pretty impressed with is Tavita Pritchard. He's just the quarterback's coach, but somebody that obviously has a lot of good relationships and has been around the league for a while. Obviously, Cliff Kingsbury. So Dan Quinn hasn't worked with him before, but this is somebody I'm super excited about on the coaching staff. Obviously, he just came from USC as the head offensive analyst there, worked with Caleb Williams, was with the Arizona Cardinals in an NFL before that. Didn't necessarily have like the best offense, but, you got to remember he was just the head coach there. He wasn't purely focused on offense. So I'm really excited about him and the schemes he can bring and the creativity. He's a younger guy. Quarterbacks seem to love him wherever he goes. So I can't wait to see what he does. We've got a new special teams coach, Larry Izzo. Honestly, I don't think we necessarily had a bad special teams in the last few years anyways. Without even looking at the stats, I would probably say we were maybe in middle of the pack as far as special teams. We didn't have any big gaffes or something that was an incredible hole that we saw week in and week out. But this guy, he was 7 years with Seattle. He's actually from the DC area, so I think that's a good pick. As far as the coaching staff and Dan Quinn especially, I'm pumped. And again, I think that we have to recognize that this is somebody that the franchise went after since day one. We didn't get a last resort pick. We didn't get somebody that, was just left over because Ben Johnson didn't want to come here. In fact, I think Ben Johnson, I used the analogy before with Ben Johnson. It reminded me the way the whole thing went down of like when I was in high school. And if you had a girlfriend that what you thought was semi-serious at the time, if you got any whiff the girl didn't like you anymore, what did you do as an insecure young dude? You hurried up and you broke up with the girl before they could break up with you. I think that's kind of what happened here with Ben Johnson. I think that, after interviewing with him, we were doing our due diligence. We want to meet with this dude. But I think it was clear that he's not that leader of men that we were looking for. Ben Johnson probably picked up on that. I think maybe Ben Johnson also had maybe some self-awareness to say, I'm not ready for this role. And so he called things off. But, and again, the narrative was easily for us to say, okay, well, he didn't want us. Now we got to hurry up and find who's left. I don't think that's what happened at all. So super pumped about Dan Quinn and, the influence he's had to bring over talented coaching that now want to be here. We've never had that before. So that's the coaching staff. As far as our players, so again, quarterback position, I think it's safe to say we're probably going to pick a quarterback. There might be a scenario where we don't pick a quarterback and we trade down and we go wide receiver or O-line. But I think 98% chance that we go quarterback here. I'm a big Jaden Daniels fan. That's who I want to pick. As far as what's already on the staff, I love Sam Howell. The guy brought a lot of hope, seemed like a really level-headed dude with a good, head on his shoulders. He didn't get rattled very easily, but he clearly has some deficiencies. And yes, you could have him as a backup. I personally don't think that's a good move. I think that with us drafting a quarterback, a young guy, we want that seasoned vet in there. We already have that with Jacoby Brissett. I don't know if we're going to be able to hold on to him because it's something that a lot of teams want, and they consider that a valuable position. So there's been a lot of talk of Jacoby maybe going to the Patriots. I think that we should, if necessary, even overpay to keep Jacoby Brissett. For one, he's a heck of a football player. He may not be starting caliber, but he can come in a pinch. We saw that just for ourselves the last year when he came in and had pretty amazing numbers. And he's a great mentor. He's loved wherever he goes. Coaches, players love him. I think this is somebody we want to pick up and pay to make sure he stays on our team, which can only help our new quarterback. Sam Howell isn't going to fit that role. He's a young guy himself. He's still learning. I think he's got probably a career in the NFL to some capacity, but not necessarily a starting quarterback, at least not now in this time in his career. So that's that. Running back. I love Brian Robinson. I love the way he runs. He runs a little upright, but somehow he still knocks everybody over, and his legs are always moving, and he doesn't go down the first hit. I know Alex isn't a huge fan of Brian Robinson. I feel differently about that. I'm a big fan. Antonio Gibson. I love the guy. Very athletic. I don't know if we can keep him, and I don't think I'm going to lose sleep if we don't keep him. I think there's other good options out there for a second running back. Free agency that's available right now. So I think we'll probably look there elsewhere. If we hold on to him, great, but I'm not losing sleep over it. And then I really like Chris Rodriguez and what we saw with him so far. So that's the running backs. As far as wide receiver, Scary Terry, we love him. Jahan Dotson. So, he was definitely a disappointment this past season. I think a lot of people thought that he might even surpass Terry McLaurin as far as numbers. Terry McLaurin didn't do great either, but I think that was more a result of the ball being passed around and distributed more evenly to all players. So no one receiver had really phenomenal numbers. But Jahan Dotson definitely underperformed. Don't get me wrong. He dropped a lot of passes. He didn't seem completely into it. I don't know what his deal is, but we obviously want to see more this year. Obviously, it's somebody we want to hold on to, and he's going to be a starter, but we've got to see more from him. Other than that, Jamison Crowder is somebody else I just wanted to mention. We obviously are familiar with him if we're diehard Commanders fans because he used to be on our team years ago and did well with Kirk Cousins. Left, went to the Bills for a while, been around the league for sure. And then we picked him up and used him for special teams, and he did fun. He was an immediate upgrade from Dax Milne, who was a huge just disappointment. And he did a pretty good job. I'd love to see him re-signed if we can get him for a good price and he's healthy, which could be an issue. Or maybe we want to go young and we have a new guy that's perfect for that. I'm not sure, but I wouldn't be mad if we held on to him. De'Ami Brown, this is somebody, he just fell into that category for me that you can see talent, you can see speed. He's actually not the fastest dude, but he was still good for that go route. And every time he had an opportunity, it just seems like the ball went literally through his hands every time. So he was always Mr. So close and didn't actually capitalize. So we'll see what happens with him. Curtis Samuel's another guy. Love that he's on our team. We used him in pretty cool ways when we could, but I think that there's going to be a big demand for him in the market out there with other teams. I think maybe like the Chiefs or the Bills or some sort of offense where they need somebody for a particular style play, and he just fits that perfectly. And a team might be willing to pay for that. Whereas maybe we don't want to, or it's not going to work in our new offense. Love to have him, but I feel like he's going to be a hot commodity. Okay, so Zach Ertz is somebody we just signed. So immediately, on the surface, I wasn't super pumped about this, but Alex kind of went over it with me, and we both agree this actually was a great pickup. I saw some tweets out there, saw a lot of people say, "Oh God, seriously, this is just a typical Commanders, move to pick up somebody that's like an old name." I don't see it that way actually now after really digesting it. Again, you got to remember this is a new regime. This is a new offense. This is obviously going to be a new quarterback. We want a safety net in there. We don't have any safety net in tight end right now. We got rid of Logan Thomas, who wasn't a safety net to begin with. I think he underperformed. We've got a young guy in Jonathan Bates, who I think is a pretty good tight end, but again, nothing great. Cole Turner, okay, wasn't a great blocker. And then we've got Armani Rogers as another tight end that it sounded like he was going to be a big part of the offense last year. There's a lot of talk about him in the preseason and training camp, and then he got hurt. We never saw him. So we need that safety net at tight end for a young quarterback. Zach Ertz, I think, is the epitome of that. He's got a lot of talent. He has worked with Cliff Kingsbury in Arizona, and he's going to be that perfect role for that new quarterback coming in. And we got him for a good price. It only cost us $5 million. A lot of that money is tied with incentives, so it's not like we're just stroking a check for $5 million. He's got to earn it. So I think this is a good pickup. I think this is more of many, obviously, pickups that we're going to have, but that's a good start in my book. O-line, not going to go over the whole O-line. It's a mess. We need help. We need to get people every which way we can get people. Center, obviously, I mean, we cut our young guy, Nick Gates, and I think we needed to. He kind of sucked. And then when we brought in the vet Tyler Larson, he actually did much better. Not that Tyler Lawson's a long-term answer either, but there is that guy with the Bills that just got released. I can't remember his name. Alex, I'm sure, knows that off the top of his head. But this is a veteran, and Bills are just trying to make some cap space. I think he'd be a great fit. But there is a lot of other players available, so I'm curious to see what we do. We need a lot of help with all those positions: right guard, left tackle, right tackle, all of it. So we'll see what happens. And I really don't see anybody on the roster worth really seeing as a foundation other than maybe Sam Cosme, who's done pretty well. But we'll see. And then on the defensive side, Cam Curl, I think that's the big one for us, and as to see what happens with him. He's a free agent. He's coming off that rookie contract. One heck of a player. We obviously hit big with this guy. We drafted him, I think, the 5th round. And, he's got elite numbers PFF-wise. He didn't have any picks last year. Didn't do anything amazing last year, but still graded really well. And then the year before, it was even better. So he's coming off that rookie contract. Good for him. He's going to make a lot of money on wherever he goes. I'd love to hold on to him, but there is going to be a market for him. However, I will say, just in the last few days, week, there's been other DBs that have been released to make cap space that are really good. So that's kind of, makes his market a little bit more depressed. And that's better for the Washington Commanders, right, where we could negotiate. So I'm not sure if this is somebody we want to put on a long-term deal, right, for a safety. I mean, you do that for somebody like maybe an Ed Reed or, somebody like that, maybe even like a Sean Taylor. But I don't know if Cam Curl's that guy. He's not a huge playmaker as far as turnovers. He's very good. And then you also have to consider the young guys that we have. We've got Derek Forrest, who I was a big fan of. We did not see him a lot last year because he got hurt. The year before, if you remember, if you're a Commanders fan, he was flying all over the place, knocking the ball out nonstop. Super impressive. So if he's healthy, and then we've got the other young guy in Quan Martin, who's also just done a great job. He got a lot of playing time the second half of last year, and he did really well. He had a couple picks, and I think he's pretty impressive as well. So we've got young guys. We've got more available in free agency. And I know we like to hold on to players, especially since we don't get a lot of good players, and Cameron Curl's a good one. So I'm curious to see what happens with that. It might work to our advantage since his market, there's more options. Maybe we have a little bit more negotiating power, and we obviously have a lot of money to spend. So that's what I wanted to mention. As far as the money to spend, yes, we are number one in cap and available money to spend, but you have to remember our owner just, paid $5 billion for this team. We're not necessarily raking in the money as far as fan base. We're towards the bottom. We're still paying for the coaching staff for another year. Ron Rivera, Jack Del Rio, so I still got to pay them. So, and you have to have that money aside for signing bonuses, anything you want to offer. You actually have to have that money. So I think it's a little easier said than done when you see this number and think, oh my God, we're going to go on a spending spree. I think we're going to do it the right way. Like I said, my number one priority is believing in our new GM, which we haven't had a real GM in a very long time. And so with that said, I think this guy's probably going to look more long term. So he's obviously going to try to build this roster, which we need, but it's not going to be the Dan Snyder days where just you're writing checks left and right. You're trying to max everything out, get big names. He's going to do it right because he wants this to be a long-term successful franchise. That might mean, and he's got to look at the bottom line that the owner's telling him about. So it is exciting to see what happens in the next few weeks as far as free agency. So stick around for that. I hope this helps. If you guys have any other opinions or think I'm dead wrong about anything, leave some comments for me and let me know what you think. And I mentioned I want Jaden Daniels as our quarterback. I think that's going to happen. I can't wait. All right, guys, you take care.